Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Divine Data. Today I'm sat with my friend Ken Jordan. He is the co-founder and editorial director of Lucid News. How are you today, Ken?
I'm doing all right. Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you here on Zoom, this new platform of where we get to meet and congregate and have the conversations now in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, wherever you are, it's great to see you. And you can take it with you, and you can close the laptop, you can put it in your travel bag, and you're anywhere. That's the way this works.
Last time we spoke, I was in Costa Rica. Now I'm in Texas, and Ken's coming from New York.
Yep. And it all looks like, four walls in the window. Yeah. It's pretty much how it goes.
That's what it's been. Four walls, a window, and this black mirror here that we like to look into and speak to each other through.
Yeah.
So Ken, do you want to tell us a little bit about Lucid News, this new venture of yours? I'd love for the audience to hear.
Yeah, sure. Lucid News is a journalism platform about what's happening in psychedelics. I'd say about 6 months ago, a few of us came to the realization that this psychedelics world is growing and changing very, very quickly. And there was a real need for a place you could go just to keep track of all the different things that are happening, because there's like research reports that are being released about the medical possibilities of using psychedelics in many different ways. There's a business, is actually something that people are now calling the psychedelics industry, that's emerged in the last year for the most part, certainly in this sort of size and shape that it's taking. And some $400 million have been invested in pretty much the last year into that space. There's legalization efforts that are happening. It's only been a year pretty much since Denver decriminalized psilocybin, and then Oakland and Santa Cruz and now other cities and states are voting on and passing the decriminalization laws that are making psychoactive plants, which I call, plant spirit medicines, either decriminalized in some way or potentially even legalized within certain contexts. Things are moving very, very quickly in this space, and those of us who have been in this psychedelic world for a while and felt like we had some idea what was going on, we kind of got blindsided, honestly, by just all the activity. And a number of us who have backgrounds in media and journalism came together to start Lucid News, specifically to offer a platform where all these events could be covered in a straightforward, even-handed way that allows all of us to be able to just track it and see where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah, it's really important work right now, especially being in like the frontiers of that and ushering in this new age and new understanding of the healing powers and transformative powers of these psychedelics and plant medicines. How did you get involved in the psychedelics world?
That's a story. And I'm not sure I know exactly how to tell it. I guess, I did psychedelics in college, like a lot of people. And I wasn't frankly that excited by it. Didn't play a massive life-changing role in my life. But found it valuable. Then I'd say 15, 20 years ago, I started to get interested in psychedelics again. Some of my friends were were attracted to ayahuasca, which is a very different kind of experience than what I had done when I was younger. And then when I sat with ayahuasca for not the first time, actually, I think it was more like the sixth time, I got a kind of tap on the shoulder that there's a lot going on here that I could benefit from pursuing and exploring for myself. And I ended up having some really profound experiences. So that for me, really was the doorway into psychedelics from this more serious perspective. And at the same time, having a meditation practice, having done a lot of yoga in different ways, never that accomplished, but, I made the effort and I sweat a lot. And being interested in, other kind of consciousness modalities, I came to understand psychedelics as part of a continuum of an opportunity for shifting consciousness, opening up consciousness to other aspects of what it is to be human that our materialist society doesn't necessarily give a lot of attention to. And then I became really interested in how psychedelics are being developed as medicines more recently, and the kind of medical research that's been happening, and the interest that's just coming at psychedelics on the one hand, and then what these research results are showing from a scientific perspective on the other, that this world of psychedelics is actually extraordinarily fertile. And so, how did that's kind of how I tiptoed into it. And then I found myself surrounded by it.
Yeah, once you start doing the work, you find yourself magnetizing the same people, people in that vibration that are looking and seeking for the same answers. I feel I had a pretty similar journey where I, dabbled in psychedelics personally and had some profound experiences, but couldn't really understand them because I wasn't surrounding myself around people who understood the integration process and who understood the importance of and the sacredness of these medicines. And when I finally started to find that, I was in Peru and I had my first experience with ayahuasca, and I had a totally different outlook on these medicines and psychedelics, and understood that they had to be respected and to be studied, and you had to understand that you're embarking on a journey. And so to create a platform, that allows people to go and learn about all of the scientific studies and all of the reasons why these psychedelics are, healing and helpful and medicinal rather than just party drugs, is really integral right now. Especially with everything going on in the world. I know that working with Thank You Plant Medicine, we do the integration circles, and to make sure that people who are experiencing stuff at home right now are being taken care of after. And so now they can go to Lucid News and understand, what works for what, and where it's legal to do what, and, why it's good to do this for this, why it's bad to do that for that, because we need that knowledge and understanding, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what it's all about. The scene is growing and changing very, very fast, right? So as I was getting into, developing my own relationship with psychedelics and seeing it as part of the sort of broader continuum of consciousness modalities, I started with some friends this online network called Evolver, which published a magazine, Reality Sandwich, which was kind of like, we described it back then as the Harper's blog of consciousness, basically, kind of like longer, in-depth essays and interviews with leading figures in this scene. And honestly, at that time, we started in 2007, really, and that's when we got going. And at that time, psychedelics were totally taboo. Completely taboo. You could not talk about them in polite company and expect that you're going to be, treated with any kind of respect. It was the sort of thing you hid from people, right? And in fact, for the first couple of years after we'd started the magazine, people would come up to me and say, with all seriousness, do you think you can get arrested for this? Right? And all we were doing was publishing articles about ayahuasca and things like that, right? And I never felt we were, but there's always this sense of it's like really, whoa, underground and kind of like black leather jacket and sunglasses at midnight, you know.
Like dirty or something, yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's like dirty or something.
Yeah, kind of like, you know, really
Right.
underground and really kind of dangerous, you know, and the cops are going to come knocking on the door. I mean, that idea that, you know, you're really in danger of getting arrested. Now, I got to say, you know, at this moment, you know, as a white guy, I felt privileged and I knew I wasn't going to get arrested, right? But there were a lot of people, you know, who were black or people of color who had more reason to be afraid of that possibility. And so, and still do, obviously, to this day. But from that privileged position that I, as, you know, white, at least white passing, undergroundy kind of character, I knew I was just not going to, I'm not dealing, I'm not going to get busted. So, but there was definitely a stigma associated with psychedelics, right? And I honestly think it only shifted in 2013 for me, from my perspective. It was only in 2013 that things started to really turn. And that's when I kind of got the hit that psychedelics were being seen in a different light. And that was at a MAPS conference, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They had a conference in Oakland in 2013 where they were expecting 600 people, maybe. You know, generally there's, you know, folks in tie-dye Grateful Dead t-shirts coming to talk about how cool the science around tripping was, basically. And instead they got 1,800 people. And it was a lot of folks who were, you know, looked like they were comfortable in ties. They were doctors, right? Like, what just happened, right? And that was the moment for me. That was the spring of 2013. It's like, whoa, we're now in a moment, different moment. That's something's happening. But even then, it took a while before you got to the point where psychedelics kind of like flipped and became the trendy kind of, you know, interesting spiritual pursuit of choice for a whole psychographic, you know, including CEOs who want to go down to Peru and sort of prove their mettle and change their lives. That wasn't happening in 2013 just yet, except in very, very small pockets.
Right, and very quietly, if at all.
Right. It was happening, but it was happening in this kind of very, really, it's like, whoa, is that actually happening? Kind of like shock.
So what do you think that is? Why do you think that, you know, psychedelics have been so taboo and illegal and all of that? Do you think it's because, I mean, I know that there's people who say that the government saw how great and powerful they were and connective and they didn't want people to do that? Or do you think it's because they're actually dangerous?
No, I mean, there's a whole fascinating history to this. A number of really good books have been written about this. Acid Dreams by Martin Lee and Bruce Slane is one. Jay Stevens' book, Storming Heaven, is another. They really get into how psychedelics were essentially, you know, transformed during the 60s into something that the government really felt needed to be controlled. The 60s were a very different moment than ours today. I mean, we live in a world that is so much more open and freer than it was at that time. And for the folks who discovered psychedelics in those very early days, people like Timothy Leary or Allen Ginsberg, they saw in them the potential to truly, deeply disrupt the society at a very high level and to create a crisis. They wanted to create a crisis because they felt that the country that supported segregation, that was going to war in Vietnam, that was, you know, at that point they were starting to understand how we were destroying the environment, that essentially a system that was very destructive needed to be exploded. And that was very much the strategy of getting everybody to use LSD at that time. The phrase that Ginsberg and Leary used was that America needs to have a nervous breakdown. Okay. And it worked. It really did. But in the process, the people who felt that they were being attacked by the hippie countercultural new left group that had embraced psychedelics were also the people who were in charge of the police. So they could demonize and ultimately criminalize the behavior of the people who they felt they were attacking them, and that included putting psychedelics into Schedule 1 classification and making them unavailable. Right now, it's been a long time since then, and slowly but surely attitudes have changed. And frankly, many of the people who are in positions of authority in and out of the government have had psychedelic experiences, and they understand that they're not necessarily that destructive in the way that they had been in the 1960s, where people were so boxed into what they called the gray flannel suit kind of corporate man perspective, that taking something that took them outside of that worldview was just deeply unsettling and shocking for many people. It was like, whoa, is that possible that the world doesn't conform to the very rigid materialist reality that we think it does, right?
And now we're seeing CEOs who are having their entire staff do meditation retreats and silent retreats and ayahuasca retreats and all of the things.
Yeah, totally flipped. And so I see that's a victory. I see that as a victory for what was at the core of that 60s counterculture movement and how it's infiltrating the world that we're in today. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but I find that particular expression of it really encouraging.
Do you think we're in some sort of like reiteration of those days and more of like a well-researched and understood time and does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, sure. No, I mean, some people say, oh, wow, the 60s are coming back. I don't see that necessarily. I mean, because things have changed so much. It's been 50 years. But many of the currents that were part of this, very subversive, small scene, really, which was the counterculture and, kind of new left world. That was not the majority of the country by any means. That was weird little pockets here and there around the country. They got a lot of attention for a very relatively small group of people. Like the first demonstration in Washington, D.C. against the Vietnam War in 1965 was 15,000 people. And it got on the front page of the New York Times. It was nothing. But because dissent at that time was so rare, so few people had spoken up in that way at that time in history, and it had been for 100 years or whatever, 70 years since the Civil War, it was notable, right? So it didn't take a lot of people in the psychedelic scene of that period to get a lot of attention, right? And then the Beatles, for instance, became their propagandists and spread it out all over the place. But you also have to remember, most people didn't like Beatle music back then. Most people said, I remember this from when I was a kid, the drums are too loud. That was the thing you kept hearing people say. The Beatle drums are too loud. If you can imagine that.
I mean.
It's like, well, Ringo just can't get, it's like, what is that thumping? It's like, wow, things change, right? But what's happening now, seems to me, is a maturation of those original impulses. It's growing to another level now. Because you have 3 generations that know how to hold that kind of consciousness space, right? Back then, nobody meditated. They had no idea. Like they were just trying to figure some of this stuff out. The Eastern spiritual wave was just starting to hit, and And there was a lot of naivete around that and how to hold that, right? The guy who brought Tibetan Buddhism to America, Trungpa, used to say that, he said this to Ginsburg, is how the only reason I don't know this, is that that without LSD, America would not have been ready for Tibetan Buddhism. That you needed to take LSD in order to be available to the kind of different approach to consciousness that practice makes available, right? Today, you have millions and millions, 10%, no, 9%, I think, of the American workforce meditates regularly, right? 37 million Americans are doing yoga, right? 30 million Americans had done psychedelics in 2010 when the last kind of major survey was done, right? So something's happened, right? There's a shift that's going on. My concern is that it's not well articulated in a way that the general public recognizes and understands as like a crystallized a demographic or psychographic, group of the population, the way that, say, the Tea Party did, right? A lot of money went into that, but the Tea Party became like this expression of a certain kind of perspective or worldview. I think there's just as many or more of us now who are kind of in this, more or less consciousness kind of perspective, but it just doesn't have a coherent platform.
Right. It sounds like then was the revolution and now is the like evolution, like this is really where we see the humanity truly evolving, especially in this one big field that is, it's the consciousness field. It is the field that affects us all, and it is, maybe not wise. It's quite understandable to be wary of psychedelics because there are people on the planet who have predisposition to psychiatric disorders who should not ever touch psychedelics or should be, very monitored and like should know exactly their brain chemistry. We should be able, and that's the education and that's the understanding and stuff that we need to be giving the people as well. Because while this is like a huge consciousness evolution tool, it's also something, like I said earlier, it needs to be respected and understood and well researched on top of all of that.
It's not one size fits all by any means, right? I mean, everybody's got their own path into this. You don't need psychedelics to reach the realizations that can come through psychedelics. They can happen through other practices. And at the same time, everybody responds to different psychedelics or different lineages that use different plants or whatever chemicals. Yeah. In different ways, and some speak to you and some don't, or one might or none may. And there's definitely the issue about, for some people, that they may be dangerous, and that's a physiological thing.
Psychedelic safety and psychedelic research is really important to understand, like all of those things for sure. And you mentioned like there's other practices as well, and you have the Alchemist Kitchen in New York City where you guys offer a lot of different like workshops and different healing modalities, and even in the store, different things that you can like take home and work with and enter into these consciousness spaces as well without the psychedelics. You want to tell us a little bit more about your space there in New York?
Yeah, sure. Well, they came out of Evolver. The community at a certain point grew. We had 50 local groups around the country at one point. This goes back a number of years. Reality Sandwich became, fairly popular. And we had been, over the years also been doing a bunch of events, live events in New York and other places. But we always were trying to figure out, like, how do you keep this thing going? Because we didn't have any, revenue stream really beyond, it's online learning, some things, but very small. And we always had this dream that there would be some kind of store associated with it that comes out of the community, actually out of the needs and interests of the community. And then we identified herbalism as a key area with a lot of stuff going on, really exciting. A new generation of makers of, plant wellness products who are doing innovative things. They were, on the one hand, having, deep kind of personal connection to the plants through their own practices, personal practices. And they're kind of like poets, really, many of them, concocting things that are also based on the latest science and understanding of how medicinal plants work together in a way that hadn't been available before, because you could bring together different plants from different parts of the world now with greater ease than you ever had before. So you can understand like how a bark from Venezuela and a leaf from Idaho and a root from Siberia could all somehow make something really cool, right? So we started this originally online herbalism shop, the Alchemist Kitchen, and then we got a space on East First Street between Bowery and 2nd Avenue, 21 East First Street, where we could actually set up shop and invite people in and do a lot of events, offer some food, and that's actually been a great experience. We feel like we've been able to help to catalyze a real scene of practicing herbalists in New York who are connecting to a different way of thinking about how you take care of your body and your mental state. Sort of
Also providing a community too. That's like the most beautiful part about it. I know that the few times that I've been in Alchemist Kitchen, it's stepping into its own portal, and that's beautiful that you guys have created this energetic space where it feels like a big family and that you're entering into that home of the family and you're part of it. And there's all of the things that you could want, especially in this like new age hippieism or whatever you want to call what we are, just the conscious evolution of humans coming in and collecting. And we get to have our favorite teas and we get to go and buy our crystals and go to this great event and congregate with people with like-minded lifestyles and all of that. So yeah, thank you for creating that space.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I got to say, we kind of stumbled into the timing of it, but it turned out to be kind of perfect. It was just like the scene had been growing kind of quiet. Like I said, in 2013, you could already feel like this shift where what had been taboo was less taboo, and that there was kind of more mainstream engagement. And with a lot of the topics we're talking about here, psychedelics is certainly one. By 2016, when we opened up the Alchemist Kitchen, there was a scene that was waiting for a space, basically, to be catalyzed. So around plants and wellness, but more broadly around all these different topics. And, I got to say, the events we did around psychedelics turned out to be by far the most popular things we did in the space. And originally, it was 2 floors. Downstairs, we were able to do large gatherings in the first 6 months or so. We had 150 people there for a talk on microdosing, paying $25 to get in the door. Whereas a year earlier, I would have had at the door to please drop in a $5 bill if you are interested, and 7 people would show up, not quite, say 20 people. But, really nothing like this. This was like, boom, something was triggered. And the interesting thing to me also about the Alchemist Kitchen was, who's showing up? Because, the consciousness world had been very much up to that point, it did not include professionals, right? It didn't include people that much. I mean, there were always few here and there, but for the most part, you're talking about people who were kind of like, not doing, the main street Manhattan type hardcore business gigs. But something was starting then to kind of click for a lot of people who were had been doing a kind of straight and narrow professional path, and they were feeling like the advertising company they were working at, or the marketing firm, or the whatever that might be, was somehow not quite as satisfying as they had hoped. And they were discovering that the paradigm around their own bodies and health and wellness was somehow kind of not quite working for them either. And they're looking for alternative modalities, and plant wellness was, a part of that. They were maybe meditating and suddenly like starting to notice things that they hadn't noticed before, which is what it's all about. And then realize it becomes more sensitive to their bodies and realizing, when I eat this thing, I feel sick. I better stop eating that. Or, hey, if I take that tincture, I feel kind of interesting. Try that tincture.
That felt nice.
Yeah.
I love that you keep mentioning 2013, because like the Mayan calendar, 2012, the world's ending, and like I look at those things so different. I see that as, yeah, the old world was ending. We were stepping into this new world. We're coming into this new paradigm, not the new world order, that stuff. No, we're stepping into like a space, this new evolution of our consciousness. And I think that we're even in that continuum right now. 7 years later, after you see this shift, the world is going through a whole lot, and it's going through an even bigger shift right now than I think even then. I think at this point, the whole globe is noticing this shift. It's not just pockets, it's the whole world. And, especially with these like psychedelics and plant medicines, look, we bring awareness to these plant medicines, maybe we'll stop ruining the forests and lands and all of that, and taking the land back from indigenous people where these medicines originate from. Maybe we can start protecting each other in that way. Maybe if people start to heal themselves using these psychedelics, if that's the path that they choose, we'll stop being so destructive as a society, as a humanity. So I really see all of this like beautiful positivity, and I know that the world is going through a lot right now, and I am here for all of that. I am. But I'm also seeing that global mycelium just getting stronger and stronger and bigger and more beautiful. And I think that, Timothy Leary was onto something back in the day, and that we're just figuring out a way to do it properly. And yeah, ushering in this new time is really important, being the people, especially you having experienced all of these different, iterations of it, like being the people to be like, here, we're here to show like a new way. And it's really important work that you're doing that you did with Evolver, that you're doing with Lucid News, that you're doing at Alchemist Kitchen. It's important stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. There's definitely something going on now. That's for sure. A lot of different opinions about that, about what it is. But there's no question that it's a shock to the system for most of us, and it's challenging a lot of the long-time held assumptions that our society has been founded on. That they're, it's like a lot of things you thought you could depend on, you can't depend on. It turns out, guess what? And it's definitely putting the brakes on doing business as usual for most people. And if nothing else, that creates a space for folks to step back and reevaluate their lives. One of the interesting things about a deep spiritual practice or psychedelics, which I think of as being pretty parallel, is that they get you to detach from your unexamined worldview and see things through somewhat different eyeglasses. And in the process, you start to notice that there's stuff going on that you hadn't seen before, on the one hand, and opportunities. And also that the things that you had taken for granted for a long time really are vapor. And they're concepts, and they can be reorganized and changed. Things can change. And it seems like one of the interesting outcomes of this moment is that can be happening. I don't know yet, it's only been a few months, but on a global scale, everyone has got to deal with this situation and really think about it. And those of us who have got kids, I got a 10-year-old, and he's, now doing the distance learning and distance camp in the apartments in Brooklyn, right? And it ain't gonna stop for another year or more, right? You're gonna have an entire generation of kids growing up having experienced this very traumatic rupture in their life, right? Who knows what that's gonna lead to, but I expect that it's gonna be very creative. Not that this is easy,
No,
but it's gonna be very interesting.
At all. But yeah, we're being given this like really, really significant opportunity to go inside, literally. And I keep saying that, you know, like we're stuck inside. Now it's time to really go inside.
Mm-hmm.
And do that work, that inner work that's super necessary, because we've been taken away from all of the distractions and all of the rest of the illusion that is the world. That's been shut down. It's not there. It doesn't exist, you know? So the rest of what we get to create, the reality that we create, is literally what is happening like inside here. Because like the rest, you can't really go do anything outside. There's no distracting you from whatever's going on in your subconscious and doing that work. And you get to, with those medicines, with this work, with even just meditation, with all of this like esoteric, once known as woo-woo work, is going to be, hopefully, I see, like the normal stuff. This is going to be like flossing your teeth. It's going to be meditation. You know, it's just as important.
Yeah, I see that coming too. I mean, or let me put it this way. I think that's the potential, right? The jury's out, man. You don't know what's going to happen.
You never know. We never knew it. Like that's also something I've been trying to say to people is like, look, these times are weird. These times are very different, but I'm not sure what uncertain times look like, because I think that all times, any given moment is uncertain. You know, before a pandemic, before anything was happening, it was always uncertain. There was never truly any certainty. You know, you going to a 9-to-5 job every day didn't give you certainty that, you know, you would be taken care of for the rest of your life or whatever. It was just like, it's still kind of a gamble. It's like, who knows what might happen? This company might fall apart. I might get hit by a bus on the way to school. I don't know what might happen. I hope not. But every moment is uncertain, and we're being given this opportunity to kind of say like, all right, I get it. Like, I have to really sort this stuff out first for any of the other stuff to work out. And if the other stuff doesn't work out, at least I have my nervous system in check and I know how to like stay grounded in a really like intense situation. So like, yes, there's going to be trauma from this, but I also hope that it helps like build stamina, backbone, resilience to times that are different.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that you know is certain is that everything is going to change.
Always.
Always. Right. But that, you know, then there are these techniques that you can learn, whether they're in, you know, they come through psychedelic zap, or because they come through some kind of practice that you do, it's like spiritual practice or whatever it might be, that you suddenly recognize at some point. For some of us, it was a sudden kind of recognition that, oh, there's this thing that persists that I got, that's with me, that's like full of light and amazingly connected to joy, that's never going away. Now, why did it take me so long to figure that out? God only knows. But eventually I kind of, you know, I get that tap on the shoulder every so often. It's like, oh yeah, remember that. Don't forget that. And then these are the only two things you got. Everything's going to change. And you're there. You're right here, right now. Bang.
And we get to choose every day if we're going to live from that place of joy or if we're going to stay stagnant. And like, there's so much that can keep us stagnant right now. And to anyone listening, I get it. I truly understand that. But I also have been through my darkest night of my soul. And I'm here today to tell you that I still wake up every morning and I choose to live from a place of joy as much as I can, because that is how I get to keep going in this life. And that is how I also get to offer anything to anybody else in this life right now. So whatever it takes for you at home to feel grounded, and secure in yourself, and to like be able to do this inner work, I really highly suggest, if you don't have a practice that leads you to remembering that joy and coming home to yourself, try something. Go read Lucid News. Find out if psychedelic journeys may be for you. And there are plenty of places. And if you're going through anything, I know that for myself, I'll briefly say I got through PTSD because of ketamine. I went to a doctor in New York City, New York ketamine clinics. I had PTSD, suicidal thinking, and it saved me, to be completely honest. I mean, I saved me. I had to do the work. It wasn't just going and getting ketamine infusions that totally did the work, but it helped like make my like neurons meet each other again when they've been like doing a dance kind of like this, trying to find each other. And it really did help connect them again. And it really did help bring me back to a place where I was able to see that light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm appreciative of everything you're doing with all of that. I'm appreciative of all of the people at MAPS studying all of this stuff, bringing awareness. Thank you, Plant Medicine, all of the companies. That's why I'm such a big proponent and advocate of you guys. So thank you so much, Ken. And is there anything else you want to share with us?
Oh, well, thank you. This was awesome. Please check out Lucid News. It's at, lucid.news. We're publishing, a few days a week, and hope to be picking up the pace as we go forward. And yeah, this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me, Sam.
And I'm sure I'll see you on one of these black boxes again one day.
I imagine so. All right. You take care.
You too.